Hello, my fellow Americans. I'm over here in Germany with Anne. Say hi.
Hi.
And today we're going to be explaining to you how you're going to be assembling the Logo 200. Every step that you need to take, things to look out for, things to be cautious about. So let's get into it. This video is designed for two people to work together on the helicopters. It's much faster that way if you have a helper with you doing this. So let's get into it. To start off, you'll grab the Logo 200 boxes. We usually work in batches of about 6 to 10, depending on the size of your workbench. Go ahead and remove the foam box from the outer sleeve, and then remove the Logo 200 from the foam box. Set aside the sleeve and the boxes. Next, we will remove the canopies and the blade holders. It's helpful to have your second person holding the boom while removing the canopy. It makes it easier to get off. Then go ahead and set aside the canopies. We will not use these for the test flying as we don't want to damage them. We'll just set them aside. Next, we will pull out the batteries, and we need to check the voltage of them to make sure that they don't have a dead cell or something like this. We will not use the customer batteries for the test flying. We will just set them aside, and we will use some dedicated batteries for doing the test flying. Anywhere from 11.3 to 11.5 is okay on the voltage. So when we are mounting the V-Bar Neo Mini, there is 6 connections that we are going to plug in. There are 3 that come from the ESC case, one brown, red, and yellow with quite big wires. There's a single one with the black wires, and a single one with a white wire. Then there's the 3 that come from the servos. So the first one we're going to plug in is this one, the brown, red, and yellow with the big wire. This is our ESC port. Keep in mind, on the V-Bar Neo Mini, the black wire is up. So black wire up, plugging into the ESC port. Now the next wire to plug in is going to be this singular black one. Now don't get confused, this black is not the ground, it's actually the signal for the tail motor. So even though the wire is black, it is a signal, so it's going to go down on the signal side. And this will plug into the tail port. We'll leave this one for later. And then we're going to actually start to plug in the servo wires now. For plugging in the servo wires, there's the 3 wires that you will plug in. Channel 1 is the elevator, channel 2 is the left aileron servo, and channel 3 is the right aileron servo. You might think it's a little bit tricky to know where they all plug in, but it's actually not. You'll notice that there's 2 wires that are longer than the one that is short. So the one short wire, that is the elevator servo, which is channel 1. So firstly, we'll take this short wire and plug it into channel 1. Then, for these 2, you'll be able to see, if you look in the frame here, we'll try to get another camera angle later. If you look in the frame, you can see that one wire goes on this side of the main shaft, and another wire goes on this side of the main shaft. The one that goes this side of the main shaft, that will be your channel 2. So if you just look in, you can see it quite clearly. And this will plug in to channel 2. Then the last one, the remaining one, is your channel 3. So that is it for the servo connections, and we will double check these later on before actually mounting the Neo, so that if there's a mistake, we can fix it. So now we'll plug in this last wire. Just make sure these wires are kind of put off to the side like this. I normally do this and pinch them. And then you can bring this white wire. This is the RPM signal. So again, it's a signal wire, so it will go down, and you'll plug it into the RPM port, which is over here on the very side of it. While I'm doing the plugging, the other person can be doing the zip ties. So for example, if I had just finished this one, I can give it to the second person, and they will get ready to zip ties while I'm doing the step on this other heli. While the first person is doing the plugs on the V-Bar Neo Mini, the second person can loosely be mounting the zip ties, which we will later use to mount the wiring. So there will be 2 small zip ties, which we will use for the antennas, and 1 large zip tie, which will be for the servo wires. So the 2 small ones, they will go on the helicopter, starting with the right side. They will kind of come in behind the anti-rotation bracket at a 45-degree angle, and then they will clip around. As I said, you can just loosely leave these for now, and we will affix them later. Going to the other side. On the other side, it's a bit easier. It will just go in front of the anti-rotation bracket. And then you can loosely affix it again. We will tighten these up later. For the servo wire ones, it will wrap around this carbon plate here, same like the motor wires are, but there will be a second one for the servo wires. So you'll take the big zip tie, thread it through there. Then on the other side, it will go back in above the motor wires, out through to the other side, and then the person can loosely zip it. We will tighten this up later. Once we have the Neo Minis plugged in but not mounted, we want to bind them up and check to make sure that the servos are working properly, make sure the motor turns on, the tail motor turns on, and that the RPM signal is working. So over here you'll have your 6 to 10 helis, and you'll take them one by one and bind them to a remote. It's very helpful to have 2 V-Bar control radios and to plug them in alternating. That way when we're doing the flight testing, the models will be pre-bound to this radio, and while I'm testing one model with this radio, your helper can be plugging in the second helicopter, the following helicopter, on the other radio. And you can interchange like that. When you're doing the first plugging in, make sure that the heli is safe away from the other ones. That way, if it spools up, it doesn't damage any of the other helicopters. We had that happen. So yes, be safe, be cautious on this step. So you could go ahead and plug it in. Just kind of hold it by the skids like this. Make sure you're clear of the blades and everything. We'll wait for the model to go into the bind mode. Flashing green and red, you can bind. Once it is bound up, your helper can check that the servos are working in the proper direction by moving the collective and the cyclic. Then we're going to check that the tail is working, the motor is working, and that the RPM is working. So what I will do is I'll hold it away from myself like this. The helper will click first just into idle. This will start the tail, and I can check to make sure that the tail is working, the gyro is working. Then after that, they can click into run just for a second. And when they click into run, they will need to look at the radio at the RPM display and make sure that it is coming up. It'll take a second to show up, but it'll come up to around 1,000 or so. Also make sure when you're holding the heli to take it like this to keep the antennas out of the rotor blades, and like this, so we can go ahead and do that. There's idle, and I can check to make sure the tail is working. Now they can go into run.
960.
Okay, so just like that, a short little run, and the helper can look and it will show the RPM. This way we know the motor's working, the tail's working, the servos are working in their proper direction. So we can unplug it. We'll move this heli to the side. swap remotes to the other one. As I said, it's important to interchange them. This will help us a lot later on. I'll do these steps again. Plug in the model, hold it, make sure it's clear of everything else and the other helicopters. Once it's bound, this one was already bound, but you'll have to bind it. Check the servo directions. Yes. Okay. Take it like this, keep the antennas out of the blades and idle. Okay. And you'll see on the screen to make sure that the RPM is displaying. Once you have all 10 tested, now we're actually going to mount the V-Bar Neo Mini and do the final wiring. So I'll just take it, peel off the red tape. For the position, just push the wires back like this, so that there's maybe just a little bit of space overhanging the front here. Then look from the side, line it up across this side here to make sure that it's straight, and then press it down, give it a little push. Then when I finish this, I give it to the next person and they will go ahead and do the wiring while I'm doing the next one. For the zip ties, we'll start with the loose zip ties that we have. Take one antenna and string it through the antenna here, and then just tight it down. Medium tightness, doesn't need to be very tight, but just very snug. You can swap to the other side. We have the other zip tie here that is prepared. We'll take the second antenna, put it through, and then again, just tight it down. For the third zip tie, it's prepared and loose like this. I usually take the wires, just kind of pinch them and pull them out the side. Then fold them up a bit, just like this, you can see. And then slowly just kind of cinch on the zip tie and make it like this. It's quite simple. Then as you're working with your other helper, whoever finishes first with their roll can just come in and carefully cut these. It works better if you have a smaller die cutter, but just go in, carefully cut the 3. Now this heli is done, ready to do the test flight. So now we're at the flight testing stage. As I mentioned before, I would recommend that you just give 2 batteries, take 2 from the production. More than likely you'll have 2 helis that have some issue, so it's not really a problem. Just dedicate 2 to 4 batteries for the test flying. And what we'll do is you can just charge these up to full, and then rather than use the customer's battery and then have to recharge them after the test flight, we can just use these 2 or 4 dedicated packs, and you just can do about 5 test flights per battery, like this. So I'll be the pilot and we'll be the helper. So your helper can go in and put in the battery and plug it in. Remember I said that we have the radios interchanged to the models, so every other one is on the same radio. This way you can interchange. While I'm doing the flying, she can be plugging in the next one. So while I'm doing the test flight, she can have this helicopter plugged in and ready to go. The one other step that I need to do before doing the test flight is I need to level the swash. So after she plugs it in and it's connected, she can go into the radio and go to that swash leveling page. That way it's there ready for me when I take over. So I would take the heli. It would be in the swash trim page already. I can come here, just give it a quick eyeball. It's not very particular. The auto trim will do this mostly. But I have found that if you give a little bit of right, maybe one click of right and one click of back, it just makes the auto trim go a little bit faster, because that's what the model will need. So we make the swash level, and then we set the center pitch. To set the center pitch, what I do is I fold the blades like this, and then you can see that they're not level. I go in and I just tap on the pitch up and down trim until the blades are level with each other. At this point, I can come out, mount the canopy, and get ready to do the test flight. The last thing you want to do is, while you're walking, just check the swash plate trim to make sure that is working properly. And then I would go and do the test flight while your helper is doing the next one, plugging it in, and then going in and setting it into that swash trim menu so that me, the pilot, can go in and level the swash and set the zero pitch when I'm done. So on the first test flight, what you're going to be doing is checking just to make sure that the model works, and then going to be doing an auto trim. So what I will do is I will go into the auto trim menu first, and then I'll just spool up the heli in bank 1. And the first thing I'm going to do is just a little test hop to make sure everything is proper. That's it. Then I can go in and I can click into the auto trim to turn it on. Go to bank 2, the middle RPM. And then we're just going to do a little test hover here. And you'll want to do the test hover until the values on the screen, you'll see they'll start to increase. And they'll go up and up and up. And at some point, they'll stop going up and they'll start to come back down. So here my aileron is still climbing. The elevator is stabilized, but the aileron is still climbing. So now you can see the aileron is starting to come back down. It was up at 90, now it's back down to 85. And once you've done this, just click the auto trim off. Okay, 80 is a bit high. I don't think I leveled this swash plate very good. Normally if the swash plate is more level, this value will be a bit lower, but even anywhere up to 60 or so is okay. Now, depending on how big of a space you have and how comfortable you are, another nice thing to do is to test the pirouettes to make sure that it's pirouetting level. That just looks like this. If the model's pirouetting level, then great. If not, and it has a big wobble to it, then you'll either need to go in and redo the auto trim, or you might need to go in and manually adjust the swash plate trim to get it to be level. But hopefully you don't need to do that. So I just finished the test flight. I will come in, take off the canopy, and I can unplug the battery, hand it back to her. And then this one will be ready, and in this menu already, I can come in, set the swash trim, set the center pitch again, mount the canopy, and go. Some things to look for when doing the test flights. You want to make sure firstly that when you're doing the test hop, make sure that the V-Bar Neo is not drifting. I had 1 out of 100 so far that when I took it off, it was just very out of trim. So pay attention and be cautious about that. The second thing that you're going to be looking for is vibration. It will take you a bit of time to understand how the helicopter is supposed to sound, but after a while you will be able to hear if the helicopter is running smoothly or not. To demonstrate this helicopter is one that actually does not have is not very smooth. It has some vibration. I don't know why, but it does. If you're not sure about it and you want about the sound, you can go in to the model status and scroll to the vibration, and you can do your test flight. And you see how the vibration is up at almost 650. This is a lot too much. This is 650, almost 700. A normal helicopter will be around 200 or so, maybe upwards of 300 or 400 is okay. But if you think a helicopter is in question, you can go in and check the vibration level. If it's anything, I would say above about 500, normally means there's something wrong with it. One other thing to look for is to make sure that the ESC is driving the motor properly. I had, again, 1 out of 100 helis that when it was running, you could hear that the motor and the ESC, it was making like a whined noise, kind of like a turbo noise or something, and it had no power. And then eventually the ESC like burnt out. So pay attention to that. If the helicopter is making a funny noise, a whine or a vibration, just pay attention to those sort of things. Once you're done with the test flight, go ahead and take back a customer battery from the pile, slide it in, make sure you listen for that click. If the battery plate does not click, you will need to take it out and file a little bit on this tab here. Sometimes it can happen like that, but normally it will go in and click. Take a customer canopy from the pile again, gently put it on. Make sure the antennas are tucked inside. Grab back the blade holder. Like this, it's ready to ship out to the customer. So throw it back in the box. Every box has one of these moisture things. Then lastly, we have this, which is the quick start guide for the helicopter. I guess you guys will need to print this off, but go ahead and fold this in and place it here. And then, yes. So that's it. That's the whole assembly process. As I said, we go through 10 at a time. Depending on how big your workbench is, you might be able to go more at a time or less at a time. Also, what we found to do is kind of break it up. We will do the first, we'll do like 30 or 40 where we just have the Neos mounted, and then we'll go out and we'll do 30 or 40 test flights, just kind of to break it up and go back and forth like that. But yeah, after, I'm sure you guys will get it after the first few. It will be very easy for you, so good luck.
Courage.
Yes, and thank you for your help and everything. Bye bye.